Mr. President, this week, the Senate is moving through a series of votes to fill vacancies in the Federal Appeals Court. President Trump has nominated highly qualified, mainstream judges and legal scholars to do these jobs. Now, Democrats have responded once again with delay and with obstruction. It is clear to me that we need to change the rules in the Senate that govern how we debate nominations in this body. All year, Democrats have been putting up roadblocks to nominations. They have forced the majority leader to file cloture so that we can confirm nominees like these four judges. Mr. President, as of last Friday, Democrats have forced the Senate to file cloture 47 different times where we've had to have cloture votes on President Trump's nominees. Now, there were only 6 cloture votes at this point for the previous 4 presidents, 5 for Obama, none for George W. Bush, 1 for Bill Clinton, and 4 under the presidency of George Herbert Walker Bush. These are the kind of hoops that the Democrats have been making the Senate jump through in an effort to confirm President Trump's nominees. Mr. President, this procedure has been set in place to allow for debate. Well, debate is a good thing in the Senate as long as debate is actually occurring. It's a chance for senators to stand up, to say what they would like or what they don't like about a nominee. Now, if no one wants to debate, we should just move things along and have the vote. There's one Senate rule that allows for as much as 30 hours of debate time on presidential nominations after we've actually had the cloture vote. Now, in reality, very little of that time, which is spent on the Senate floor, actually has been being used for the debate. In the past, both sides would agree to waive the time requirements and to move on to other Senate business, which is what we need to do to get the country continuing to move forward. But what's happening now is that Democrats are insisting on cloture votes, and then they're insisting that we use hour after hour after hour, even when there's no one here to debate what's the issue or the person in front of us. It's time to end this pointless spectacle. The United States Senate used to be called the world's greatest deliberative body. Democrats have turned it into the world's most paralyzed deliberative body. We have more than 125 nominees, Mr. President, for various jobs who've had hearings in committee, who's testified in committee, who committees have voted on, who have cleared through the entire committee vetting process, and are now waiting for a vote on the Senate floor, 125 of them. Most of these people have bipartisan support. They will be confirmed easily and eventually. They should be confirmed immediately. There should be no reason for Democrats' stalling tactics, except to once again slow down the pace of other progress in the Senate on legislative issues. Mr. President, look at what happened with one judge last week. It's a case you're very familiar with. Scott Polk was nominated by President Trump to serve on the U.S. District Court. Now, he had bipartisan support in the Judiciary Committee. He went to the committee, hearing in the committee, bipartisan support, voted out of the committee. That was in June, more than 4 months ago. Now, apparently that's not good enough for the Democrats. Not at all. No, they're only interested in slowing down the work of the Senate. So we had to have a cloture vote on the nominee, one of the 47 cloture votes that we talked about. Had to have a cloture vote. Every Republican and 27 Democrats voted for him. So he had bipartisan support. We still had to allow all of this wasted time for the debate. We couldn't conduct any of the other business of the Senate during the time because the Democrats insisted that we use all the debate time. Now, they could have very easily agreed to waive the rules as we do and go straight to a vote. We wanted to do that. The Democrats refused. Now, so how much of that time, that 30 hours, Mr. President, did the Democrats actually spend on the floor debating this person's qualifications to be a federal judge? How many of those 30 hours did the Democrats use? None. How many minutes did they use? None. Not one Democrat came to the floor of the United States Senate to talk about that judge. Not a single Democrat even bothered to say a word against his nomination. there were fewer than 20 minutes of total talk on the floor of the Senate. Through hour after hour after hour of ongoing time, fewer than 20 minutes spent actually talking about the judge, and it was all spent in praise by the Republicans. We still had to run out the clock because that's the delay game the Democrats are playing in the Senate. The Senate had to waste hours and hours when we could have finished debating in less than 20 minutes. Look, the Democrats have done this same thing time after time, day after day, wasting day after day. Look, things take time in the Senate. We understand that. That's what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they formed the two bodies of Congress, the House and the Senate. There's no excuse, though, Mr. President, for Democrats abusing the process to make things take even longer. Democrats aren't using the rules for debate. They're not using the rules for deliberation. It is only for delay. It hasn't always been this way, and there is no reason it should continue to be this way. The Senate had a different standard for nominations a few years ago, Mr. President. That was in the 113th Congress, years 2013 and 2014. The Senate allowed just 2 hours of debate after cloture was invoked on nominations for district court judges. That's 2 hours more than the Democrats actually spent debating this judge's nomination last week. The rules said that we'd have up to 8 hours to debate executive branch nominations below the cabinet level, and then for cabinet secretaries, for judges on the Supreme Court, for circuit courts, it was the full 30 hours of debate. 30 hours now is what we allow every nomination today, and Democrats have shown that in most cases it is far too much time, because even though we have to spend all the time, they use very little of it talking about the nominees. Mr. President, we need a fair debate on every nomination. The procedure from 2013 and 2014, fair debate on nominations, is one that was fair. Now, the way that the Democrats are wasting time today to keep us from doing our work is not fair. I believe it is time to return to the rules for debating nominees that the Senate used 3 years ago. Still be plenty of time for senators to debate the nominees, to raise objections if there are any, and then every senator could be on the record that they just have a lot of hours that we could avoid that are being wasted today that can be used to do the people's business of this country. A president's nominations of qualified people to important jobs was never meant to be a tool for delay in the Senate or to be an obstruction to the way that Democrats have been using them. Now, these rules that we used in 2013 and 2014, Mr. President, were the result of a compromise. Democrats controlled the Senate at the time. A Democrat, Barack Obama, was in the White House making the nominations, and Republicans agreed to make these changes to the rules. It was part of a bipartisan group, and I was part of that group. There were 8 senators. They worked on this compromise. 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats. Senator McCain and Senator Alexander were part of this group. Senator Schumer, who is now the Democrat leader, he was part of this group. And there was overwhelming support for these changes on both sides of the aisle. Mr. President, it's time to do it again. Let's change the Senate rules and go back to the process that Senator Schumer supported in 2013 and 2014. Today, the schedule allows us to do 1 or 2 nominations in a typical week. If we go back to the 2014 standard, we could clear multiple nominations in a day. The Republican Senate has been busy this year, and we've made progress on behalf of the American people. We have passed resolutions, 15 resolutions, rolling back destructive Obamacare regulations, using the Congressional Review Act, signed into law by the President. We passed a budget that will help give us, as Americans, give Americans at home a raise by cutting their taxes, giving us an opportunity to do the kind of tax relief, tax reform, tax reductions, tax cuts that the American people are looking for. We need to do more. It is time for Democrats to stop abusing the rules just to delay the process. It's time to go back to the previous standard of debating nominations. It's time to pick up the pace and do the job the American people expect us to do. Now, if Democrats have a different approach and don't want to accept the standard of debate that was set in the previous Congress, then I believe, Mr. President, it is time for us to force that change. If Democrats maintain their lockstep opposition to real progress on judicial vacancies and other nominees, we should give them the chance to vote on their continued obstruction. We can vote on these nominees in a straightforward and efficient way, or we can vote to return to the precedent of the 113th Congress. That's the choice. Either way, Mr. President, it is time to vote. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.